Hello everybody. I am getting completely swarmed by mosquitoes, but this video is about how to nail sharpness every single time. These are what the pros do to nail focus every time. There's a tree over here that's kind of arched over into the water and it's creating a really nice reflection, and I want to take a photo of it. I've taken a photo of it earlier in the season, but now that there's actually color, there's greenery, it makes for some really nice contrast. So one of the first things you want to do if you're going to plan a shoot, I would strongly recommend that you set aside some time either in the evening or the morning to go shoot, because you really want good light, because light creates contrast, and the more contrast you have in an image, you'll get more detail because the edges look more refined. Because contrast adds a lot of detail to your photos, the little shadows, little bits of light, it adds so much to a photo and makes it appear sharper. But unfortunately, on days like today where it's overcast and cloudy and whatnot, you kind of can't do that. So what I recommend in this scenario, find a scene that's interesting with a lot of different aspects to it that sets it apart from just a regular photo. For instance, this one catches my eye because you have the really nice green, you have the deep dark black, and you have the white sky. We're going to try and minimize how much sky we get in this, but there'll be a little bit coming through the trees, which will look really nice. Because regardless, a good composition is a good composition, but light does play a huge factor in that. You can make a good photo look amazing in good light, but in this scenario we don't have that, but we still have a pretty good composition. The next step that I would recommend is adjusting your viewfinder. Lots of cameras have a little dial on the side here which adjusts your viewfinder. Everybody's eyes are different, and this will adjust the clarity. So just move back and forth on it while looking through the viewfinder, just until you get to a spot that you think looks sharp and clear. The next thing I would recommend is turning on stabilization, whether that's in your camera or on your lens or both. Because if you're shooting handheld, those little micro movements that you have can really mess up a shot. So turning on stabilization will help minimize that little bit of movement that you have. Also, different lenses have different stabilization settings sometimes. A lot of the times it's just one little button that you turn it on and off. But for instance, on this lens, there's two different modes. You have stabilization mode 1 and stabilization mode 2. I keep this on 1 because it does the up and down axis and the side to side axis. It also has a stabilization mode 2 that just does the horizontal movement, which is really good as if you're shooting birds or if you're shooting moving subjects like cars. When you have that panning motion that you're moving with the object, it'll stabilize for just that movement, which can be really beneficial. Otherwise, I just keep this one on 1. The next thing is your f-stop number, your aperture. If you're all the way down at like f2.8, that means you have such a narrow focusing range, which is good for portraits and it's good for like close-up shots where you really want to blur out that background. But if you want to shoot something like a landscape like this, f8 to f11 is perfect for something like this because it opens up that focusing area. If you start going up past f11 into like f22, f32, you start to get refraction, which kind of makes your photos look a bit muddy and messed up. And ideally you want to shoot in the f-stop range that your lens is most sharp, because every lens is different and they have a sharpest aperture. You can look up on Google to see where your lens is, or you can take a bunch of photos at different f-stops and just look them up in Lightroom or whatever program you're using just to see what the sharpest f-stop is. There is a fly trapped inside my glasses. My God. The next thing you should check is your ISO. And shooting at the lowest ISO is actually the best option because you have the least amount of noise in your image. But in low light scenarios where you're shooting in the evening and you have to bump up your ISO to bring in that artificial light, you can start introducing noise into your images. And noise in a photo can make the photo not look as sharp as it should be. In programs like Lightroom, you can denoise an image, which can help out greatly. But ideally, it's best to shoot at a lower ISO. If you start going up into the thousands, it's just going to keep getting noisier and noisier and noisier, and it's going to really take away from your photo. The next thing is shutter speed. If you are shooting in a low light scenario where your ISO is really high, if you bring down your shutter speed all the way, it'll let more light into your camera because your shutter is open for longer and it's letting more light hit the sensor, which means you can shoot at a lower ISO. The downside of that is if you're shooting handheld, all those little micro movements that you make while that shutter is open will make the photo look blurry. So ideally, if you're going to drop down your shutter speed quite a lot, you'll want to be on a tripod. And another helpful tip is if you are shooting on a tripod, put on a timer or have an external device that releases your shutter, either your phone or a little electronic shutter release. Another good tip is just to make sure that your lens is clear of any smudges or any dust, because you never know what's going to land on there, and it'll just make the post-production part so much easier just to not have to deal with all those little spots and smudges on your photo. Because if you have a smudge, it might actually take away from the sharpness of the photo. So we're doing a shutter speed of 1/20th just to slow down the water a little bit and smooth it out. My aperture is f11 because I really want to get everything in focus. And we have an ISO of 100. And on this little exposure compensation dial, it's a little underexposed, which is what I normally like to shoot my photos at, because I like to brighten them up in certain areas and darken them in others and make it look really moody in the editing process. We're going to put our 2-second timer on. Now we're going to focus just right in the middle of the photo. For this photo, I ended up going for a wider composition, and I bumped up my shutter speed to 1/100th because the wind had picked up a little bit. So I hope this video helped you. I hope you can take these tips into the field, because as a beginner, knowing these simple tips will improve your photography greatly. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm gonna go inside and get away from all these bugs and mosquitoes, and I'd love to see you guys back here in another video, so subscribe. All right, peace.